A dog refused food for weeks. But when the vet took an X-ray, police arrested the owner. What looked like a sad case of a sick pet was hiding something far darker, something no one could have imagined. A loyal German shepherd, trembling and weak, carries a secret locked inside her body. A secret her powerful owner will do anything to keep buried. One woman sees the truth and risks everything to expose it. But when the danger closes in, the line between saving a life and losing her own blurs. What was really inside the dog? And why was the owner willing to risk everything to hide it? I'd love to know, where are you watching from? Type it down below, and while you're here, subscribe so you'll always catch the next story. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Celia Hart stifled a yawn. Late shifts at Port Danton's veterinary clinic often dragged, but tonight felt different. Her tired eyes snapped to attention when the front door chimed. A man in an expensive suit strode in, half dragging a German shepherd whose nails clicked frantically against the linoleum. Celia's heart squeezed at the sight of the dog's distended belly and haunted eyes. "Evening. I'm Trent Mallory." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "My dog Freya needs an appetite stimulant. She's pregnant but not eating well." Celia knelt to the shepherd's level, noting how the dog shrank away from her owner's grip. "Hi, sweet girl," she said softly. Up close, the belly looked wrong, too taut, not like the gentle swell of pregnancy she'd seen hundreds of times. "Let's get her weight and vitals first," Celia said, leading them to the exam room. Freya's legs trembled as she stepped onto the scale. "This really isn't necessary," Mallory cut in. "I know she's pregnant. Just write the prescription and we'll be on our way." Celia kept her voice steady. "It's standard protocol, sir. We need to ensure—" Her words broke off as Freya started heaving, her whole body convulsing. Nothing came up, but the dog's pain was obvious. She cowered when Mallory barked, "Get up, girl." Running her hands along Freya's coat, Celia found small scrapes and raw spots. The belly felt hard as a drum, nothing like the give of a normal pregnancy. "How far along do you think she is?" 6 weeks or so." Mallory checked his watch. "Look, I have connections at City Hall. I know what I'm talking about. Write the prescription." "Mr. Mallory," Celia said, straightening to her full height. "These symptoms suggest a possible bowel obstruction. It's an emergency condition that requires immediate imaging. I'm invoking emergency protocols to stabilize her." His face darkened. "You can't do that. She's my property." "Actually, I can. State law gives veterinary professionals the authority to intervene in life-threatening situations." Celia's hands shook slightly as she reached for the phone. "I'm calling Dr. Matthews for backup and requesting law enforcement presence as a precaution." "You're making a serious mistake," Mallory growled. "Do you know who I am? One call from me and your career is over." Celia punched in the emergency numbers anyway, even as she saw the clinic director's face fall at the mention of Mallory's name. She knew she was burning bridges, but Freya's desperate eyes gave her courage. "Prep her for X-ray," she told the tech who appeared. "Full abdominal series." While they worked to position Freya on the table, Mallory paced the hall like a caged animal, firing off angry phone calls. Celia focused on keeping her patient calm as they administered the sedative. "You're safe now," she whispered to Freya, stroking her graying muzzle as the drug took effect. "We'll figure out what's wrong." The X-ray plate slid into place with a metallic click. Mallory appeared in the doorway, his expensive suit wrinkled from agitation. "This is your last chance," he said, voice low and dangerous. "Stop now, or you're finished in this town. I promise you that." Celia's finger hovered over the exposure button. Everything in her career had led to this moment. Years of being talked over, dismissed, treated as just a tech instead of a skilled professional. But she knew in her bones something was wrong with this dog, and that mattered more than any threat. "I'm sorry, Mr. Mallory," she said, not feeling sorry at all. "But I took an oath to protect animals. That's exactly what I'm going to do." She pressed the button as Mallory's face contorted with rage. The machine hummed to life, and Celia silently prayed she was doing the right thing. Whatever the X-rays revealed, whatever consequences came her way, she knew she couldn't have lived with herself if she'd ignored her instincts and let Freya leave without help. The harsh white lights cast strange shadows as they waited for the images to develop. Mallory's expensive shoes tapped an angry rhythm on the floor, but Celia stood her ground beside the sedated shepherd, one hand resting protectively on Freya's fur, ready to face whatever came next. "This career mistake will haunt you," Mallory spat, jabbing a finger in her direction. "I'll make sure of it." Celia didn't respond. Her attention stayed fixed on Freya's shallow breathing, counting the seconds until the X-rays would tell the truth. Sometimes doing the right thing meant standing alone. She'd learned that lesson long ago, and tonight she was living it. The X-ray machines were faded to silence. Celia's heart pounded as she waited for the digital images to load on the monitors. The attending veterinarian, Dr. Matthews, leaned forward in his chair, squinting at the screen. As the first image bloomed into view, Celia's breath caught in her throat. "Oh my God," she whispered. The X-ray showed dozens of oval shapes scattered throughout Freya's abdomen, perfect, uniform capsules that had no business being inside a living creature. Among them, small bits of metal hardware glinted like stars in a dark sky. Celia's eyes met Dr. Matthews's horrified gaze. "Those aren't puppies," Dr. Matthews said quietly. His finger traced the outlines on the screen. "These are drug capsules. Someone's using this dog as a smuggling mule." A sharp knock at the door made them both jump. Deputy Boone Kettering stepped in, his tall frame slightly stooped as if apologizing for taking up space. His uniform was wrinkled from a long shift, but his eyes were alert and kind. "Miss Hart, got your page about a possible animal welfare situation?" "Deputy Kettering, thank you for coming." Celia gestured to the monitors. "We have evidence of animal cruelty and what appears to be trafficking activity." Mallory burst into the room behind the deputy. "This is ridiculous. You have no right to share my dog's private medical information." Boone studied the X-rays carefully, then turned to Mallory. "Sir, I'm going to need your consent to—" "Absolutely not. This is harassment. I'm calling my lawyer right now." The deputy's voice remained calm but took on an edge of steel. "Mr. Mallory, given the visible evidence of cruelty and exigent circumstances, we don't actually need your consent. Dr. Matthews, could you explain what we're looking at?" The veterinarian pointed to specific areas on the screen. "These are foreign objects, deliberately placed in the dog's digestive tract. The abrasions and physical symptoms suggest this isn't the first time. It's textbook animal cruelty, and given the uniform shape of these capsules, almost certainly trafficking activity." Boone's posture shifted subtly, his hand moving to rest near his handcuffs. "Mr. Mallory, based on this evidence and witness testimony, I'm placing you under arrest for animal cruelty. We'll also be adding probable cause for trafficking charges." "This is outrageous." Mallory's polished facade cracked completely. "Do you have any idea who I am? Who I know? You'll all be buried in lawsuits by morning." "Sir, please place your hands behind your back," Boone said firmly. As the deputy began reading Miranda rights, Mallory's face twisted with rage. "You stupid little vet tech," he spat at Celia. "You have no idea what you've done. This isn't over." Celia forced herself to hold his gaze, even as cold fear trickled down her spine. The raw hatred in his eyes promised consequences beyond simple litigation. Once Mallory was escorted out, still shouting threats, Celia turned her attention back to Freya. The shepherd's vital signs were becoming unstable, her breathing shallow and rapid. "Her body's fighting those capsules, Doctor," Matthews said grimly. "That pregnancy story was covering up something much worse. We need to get these out of her immediately." Celia's phone buzzed. The clinic owner, Dr. Parker. Her stomach dropped as she answered. "Celia, what the hell is happening? I just got a call from the city health department about serious concerns regarding our practices. They're threatening a full inspection. Dr. Parker, we found evidence of—" "I don't want to know. Just fix this. Make it go away. Mallory has friends in every department in this city. We can't afford this kind of attention." The line went dead. Celia stared at her phone, then at Freya's monitors. The dog's pulse was racing, her body struggling against the foreign objects forced into it. They'd gotten Mallory out of the building, but his influence clearly reached far beyond these walls. She'd bought Freya some time by trusting her instincts. But now what? Every hour those capsules remained was another hour of danger for the shepherd. And if Mallory's connections were as deep as they seemed, how long before pressure from above forced them to stop treatment? "Doctor," Matthews touched her shoulder gently. "We need to prep for emergency surgery. Whatever's coming, we have to focus on saving her first." Celia nodded, squaring her shoulders. The monitoring equipment beeped steadily, marking each precious moment. She'd known standing up to Mallory would have consequences. Now she just had to hope they could save Freya, before those consequences caught up with them. Less than 3 hours after his arrest, Trent Mallory was back on the streets. The clinic's phone started ringing almost immediately. "Doctor," Parker burst into the prep room, his face ashen. "The health department is scheduling a surprise audit. The fire marshal suddenly has concerns about our building permits. And the Chamber of Commerce wants to discuss our standing in the business community." He ran a shaking hand through his hair. "Celia, what have you done? Before she could respond, another call lit up his phone. He answered, listened briefly, then pointed at her. Just stick to your tech tasks. That's all. Nothing more. He hurried out, already speaking in placating tones to whoever was on the line. Celia turned back to Freya's monitoring equipment. The German Shepherd lay curled in her kennel, refusing even water. Her pulse flickered weakly on the monitor, too fast, too thin. When Celia gently pressed her hands against the dog's abdomen, the muscles were rock hard and hot to the touch. Doctor. Matthews came in, reviewing the latest readings. Her condition's deteriorating. Those capsules could rupture any minute. We need to operate now, Celia said firmly. Every minute we wait puts her at greater risk. The clinic owner specifically said, to stick to tech tasks, and my primary task is monitoring patient welfare. These vitals show a critical situation requiring immediate intervention. The vet studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. You're right. Prep the surgical suite. I'll handle Dr. Parker. Deputy Kettering appeared in the doorway as they were gathering supplies. Thought you might need some backup. I'll keep watch. Make sure there are no unfortunate interruptions. Thank you, Celia said softly. His steady presence made her feel slightly safer. The surgery itself was grueling. Under the bright surgical lights, Freya's distended abdomen looked even more unnatural. Dr. Matthews made the first incision, while Celia monitored anesthesia levels. The shepherd's vital signs dipped dangerously several times, requiring quick adjustments to keep her under without losing her completely. Dear God, Matthews muttered as he opened the abdominal cavity. Look at this. Celia's breath caught. Dozens of capsules filled the dog's stomach and intestines, packed in so tightly they'd created pressure points on the surrounding tissue. Some were clearly full of white powder, others had been emptied, presumably after earlier deliveries. Mixed among the drugs were loose screws and small pieces of metal, the same ones they'd spotted on the X-rays. Hardware to confuse scanning equipment, Matthews explained grimly. Makes it look like normal interference on security systems. One by one, they extracted the capsules. Celia kept careful count, photographing and documenting each one before Deputy Kettering sealed them in evidence bags. The work was delicate, one slip, one torn package, and the drugs could leak into Freya's system with potentially fatal results. Twice during the procedure, Freya's heart rate plummeted. Celia's hands remained steady even as her own heart raced, adjusting medication levels and oxygen flow until the monitors stabilized. She spoke softly to the unconscious dog throughout, words of encouragement and promise. Stay with us, girl. You're almost there. Just a little longer. After what felt like hours, Matthews finally straightened up. That's the last one. 37 capsules total, plus assorted hardware. He began the careful process of closing the incision while Celia continued monitoring vitals. Gradually, Freya's abdomen returned to a normal size as the swelling decreased. Her breathing became deeper, more regular. The procedure had been successful, but recovery would be precarious. Any post-surgical infection or complication could still prove fatal to her weakened system. Celia meticulously recorded every detail, TS, weights and measurements of the retrieved items, photos of the surgery site, timestamps of vital sign changes. She knew Mallory would attack through legal channels, trying to discredit their actions and evidence. Deputy Kettering watched her work. I'm pushing the DA to fast-track this case. These capsules, plus the X-rays and surgical documentation, make a solid trafficking case. But Mallory's already got his lawyer crying about illegal search and seizure. We followed emergency protocols, Celia said firmly. The evidence of distress was clear and documented. We had both medical and law enforcement grounds to proceed. I know, but Mallory's got connections. This won't be simple. In the recovery kennel, Freya twitched in her medicated sleep. Celia sat beside her, one hand resting lightly on the dog's ribcage, counting each breath. The shepherd's survival today felt like both a victory and a beginning. Whatever Mallory's influence, whatever pressure he could bring to bear, they'd saved this one dog from being used as a living smuggling container. But as she watched Freya's chest rise and fall, Celia realized this had grown far beyond a single case of animal rescue. They'd exposed a trafficking operation that reached into city government itself. The real fight was just starting. Dr. Matthews appeared in the doorway. How is she? Stable for now. Temperature's normal. Incision looks clean. He nodded. Good work in there. Your quick thinking when her pressure dropped probably saved her life. He paused. The clinic owner wants to see us both. Apparently, the city council is convening an emergency session about our operating license. Celia gave Freya's fur one final gentle stroke before standing. The dog sighed in her sleep, finally peaceful without her terrible cargo. Whatever challenges were coming, they'd face them. But first, they'd given this one victim back her dignity and a chance to heal. The fluorescent lights hummed in the lab as Celia stared at the results, spread across the counter. Her hands trembled slightly as she read through the analysis again, trying to make sense of the patterns emerging from the data. "This can't be right," she murmured, shuffling through the papers. Of the 37 capsules they'd retrieved from Freya's body, only 12 contained actual narcotics. The rest were completely empty. Deputy Kettering leaned over her shoulder, his brow furrowed. Could the empty ones have leaked? No. Celia shook her head. The seals were intact. They were intentionally empty. She spread out the photos from surgery, arranging them in sequence. Look at the distribution pattern. It wasn't random. The empty capsules were placed systematically among the filled ones. Boone pulled up a chair, his usually calm face tight with concern. "Talk me through what you're seeing." "These weren't mistakes or failed attempts," Celia explained, her veterinary training clicking into place. "This was conditioning. They were training Freya, and probably other dogs, to accept and carry multiple capsules without rejection." She pointed to her surgical notes. "The empty ones were likely used first, getting the dogs used to the sensation before adding actual product. Teaching them to be living containers," Boone said quietly, his hand clenched into a fist on the table. Celia nodded grimly. "And look at these timestamps from her intake records. Mallory brought her in multiple times over the past few months, always claiming pregnancy issues. But these weren't prenatal checks. They were desensitization sessions, making sure she could handle increasingly larger loads." Boone pulled out his own notepad, flipping to recent pages. "That tracks with what I've found about his company's expansion. Mallory's K9 Security has been steadily taking over freight yard contracts. Started small, just a few patrol routes. Now his teams handle both perimeter security and cargo inspection." "He controls both sides," Celia breathed, the horrible elegance of it becoming clear. "His own dogs do the searching, so of course they never alert on the carriers. And with his security credentials, he can move through any checkpoint. It's not just about moving product," Boone said. "He's building infrastructure, a whole pipeline using dogs as living transport. The training, the medical cover, the security access, it's all connected." The clinic's phone rang, making them both jump. Through the glass partition, they watched Dr. Matthews answer it, his shoulders tensing as he listened. Another pressure call, Celia knew. The clinic owner had been getting them steadily since Freya's surgery. She gathered her documentation, page after page of detailed notes, photos, and test results. Her meticulous record-keeping was the only thing keeping the clinic's doors open against the mounting political pressure. "How long do we have?" she asked Boone. "Not long. Once word gets out about this method, others will copy it. We need to find his staging sites, BD, where he trains the dogs, where he loads them, before this scales up." He checked his watch. The DA's reviewing the evidence, but Mallory's lawyers are fighting hard. "We need more." A soft whine from the recovery area caught Celia's attention. She hurried over to find Freya lifting her head, nostrils flaring as she caught Celia's scent. The shepherd's eyes were clearer than they'd been since surgery. "Hey, sweet girl," Celia said softly, kneeling beside the kennel. She held out a small bowl of water. After a moment's hesitation, Freya stretched forward and took a few cautious laps. Boone appeared in the doorway, watching the interaction. "First time she's drunk voluntarily?" "Yes." Celia smiled as Freya took a few more sips. "She's starting to trust again. Like you said, it was all conditioning. Break the pattern, show them kindness instead of coercion." He trailed off, something shifting in his expression. "Wait, the conditioning routines, could you recognize them in other dogs?" Celia straightened up, understanding where he was going. "Now that I know what to look for? Yes. The physical markers, the behavioral responses, they'd be consistent across his operation." "That's our way in," Boone said. "Not just treating the victims, but using your professional expertise to identify and document the whole system." Celia looked down at Freya, who had finally settled into truly restful sleep. The shepherd's ordeal had revealed something much bigger and darker than they'd initially suspected, but it had also shown them the path forward, one that would require both Boone's investigative skills and Celia's medical knowledge to dismantle. Dr. Matthews appeared, holding another stack of reports. "The city council's demanding oversight of all our emergency protocols now," he said wearily. "They're claiming we overstepped." "We didn't," Celia said firmly, standing up. "Every decision was medically necessary and documented. And now we know why Mallory fought so hard to prevent that X-ray, dear Mayor. It wasn't just about one shipment. It was about keeping his whole operation hidden. She gathered her files, adding the lab results to her growing collection of evidence. What had started as emergency triage had evolved into something far more complex, a mission to expose and stop a trafficking system that turned loyal animals into unwilling mules. It would take every bit of their professional skill and moral conviction to see it through. The phone rang again. Another pressure call, no doubt. But Celia simply reached for her notebook, ready to document whatever came next. They had the truth on their side now, and more importantly, they understood what they were really fighting. Freya's rescue wasn't the end of the story. It was just the first crack in Mallory's carefully constructed facade. Celia sat at her desk, squinting at Freya's microchip records illuminated by the harsh fluorescent lights of the clinic. Each entry told a piece of the story, a chain of ownership changes that read like breadcrumbs leading back through Mallory's operation. "Look at this pattern," she said, pointing to the screen as Boone leaned over her shoulder. Every 3 months, Freya was transferred between different training facilities, but they're all shell companies registered to variations of Mallory's business entities. Boone pulled out his notebook, jotting down addresses. He's smart, spreading the paper trail thin, making it look like normal K9 security training rotations. But the timing doesn't match standard police or security dog training programs, Celia said, scrolling through the dates. These are short, intense periods followed by gaps, almost like... She paused, her stomach turning, like they were testing how much the dogs could handle. The next morning found them pulling up to Happy Tails Grooming, a small shop tucked between a laundromat and a discount store. The owner, Maria Chen, had been listed in several of Mallory's receipts for specialty grooming services. The bell chimed as they entered. Maria looked up from behind the counter, her smile faltering when she recognized Boone's badge. "We just want to talk," Boone said gently. "About some of your clients." Maria's hands trembled as she led them to a back room, away from the cheerful posters of perfectly coiffed poodles. "I knew something wasn't right," she whispered, glancing nervously at the door. "The dogs, they'd come in so tense, especially after what he called corrections at the port." "What else did you notice?" Celia asked, recognizing the fear in the groomer's eyes. "The truck stops, always at night, always at that old boathouse on Miller's Inlet. Private property," they said. "Don't ask questions." Maria wrung her hands. "I'd see the same dogs weeks later, different somehow, subdued." Back at the clinic, Celia spread out kennel logs and grooming receipts across the exam table. Her veterinary training helped her spot what others might miss: documented stress behaviors, weight fluctuations, appetite changes. "Here," she said, marking dates with sticky notes. "Short periods of intense activity, followed by recovery time. The pattern matches the microchip transfers." Boone made some calls, pulling strings with Harbor Patrol. "Got us a surveillance window," he said finally. 48 hours unofficial. We watch only. No engagement." They spent the afternoon preparing. Celia worked with Freya, getting her comfortable with car rides again, teaching her to give silent signals when she detected familiar scents. The shepherd's training was deeply ingrained, but her trust in Celia helped her respond to new, gentler cues. "She won't have to get close," Celia assured Boone as they studied a satellite map of the inlet. "Just confirm if she picks up any scents she associates with Mallory's operation." The map showed a promising setup, a private ramp leading to a storage shed large enough to shield vehicles from view. Easy water access, minimal visibility from the main road. "Perfect staging area," Boone muttered, marking possible observation points. They could load or unload without anyone seeing. They kept the plan simple. Observe traffic patterns, record plate numbers, identify handlers, document everything. No heroics, no confrontation, evidence gathering only. As dusk settled, they parked Boone's unmarked car under a broken streetlight with a clear view of the inlet road. Freya lay quietly in the back seat, alert but calm. 2 paper cups of coffee sat cooling in the cup holders as they waited. The minutes ticked by. Celia checked her watch. 9:45 p.m. Right on schedule, a box truck appeared, moving slowly down the access road. Its running lights were dimmed, panels patched in places that suggested recent repairs or modifications. "There we go," Boone whispered, raising his camera. Beside him, Celia felt Freya tense, nose twitching as she caught a scent on the breeze through the cracked window. The truck glided toward the water like a ghost, its engine barely more than a whisper in the night. In the darkness of their vehicle, Celia and Boone watched silently, documenting the first solid lead in dismantling Mallory's operation. Celia's hands tightened around her notebook as she recorded every detail: the truck's make and model, the pattern of the patched panels, the way it moved with the careful precision of a routine well practiced. In the back seat, Freya remained perfectly still, but her subtle body language told Celia everything she needed to know. This was familiar territory for the shepherd, and that confirmation alone made this stakeout worthwhile. The graduated glow of the dashboard clock showed 9:47 p.m. In just 2 minutes, they'd witnessed more concrete evidence than weeks of paperwork had provided. The truck's path toward the boathouse stood as silent testimony to Mallory's careful planning and to the systematic abuse of animals he'd built his operation around. Through the misty darkness, Celia's heart nearly stopped as she caught glimpses through the truck's cracked rear door. The sight made her blood run cold. Multiple German shepherds, chained and huddled among stacked wooden pallets. Their eyes reflected fear in the dim light. "Boone," she whispered urgently. "There are dogs in there. They're chained up." The deputy nodded grimly, already moving to secure the perimeter. Fast and quiet. "We can't let them drown." Celia crept toward the truck, her boots silent on the wet concrete of the boat ramp. The closer she got, the more details emerged. At least 4 shepherds, possibly more, secured with heavy chains to metal rings bolted into the truck's interior. Their ribs showed through dull coats, telling the same story of abuse that Freya had endured. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached for the first chain. The metal was cold and slick with moisture from the bay. Behind her, she heard Boone's careful footsteps as he checked the surrounding area. "Celia!" His urgent whisper cut through the darkness. "The parking brake. Something's wrong. The timber's too wet." She worked faster, fingers fumbling with the chains. 2 shepherds were already free, pressing against her legs as they sought safety. The 3rd chain was stuck, rusted shut around a terrified Malinois. A horrible creaking sound filled the air. The truck shifted, metal groaning against wood. "Get out! Now!" Boone's voice carried raw fear. Celia yanked harder at the chain, desperate to free the last dog. The truck lurched forward suddenly, tires losing grip on the slick wooden ramp. In that frozen moment, she saw everything with crystalline clarity. Dark, the terror in the Malinois' eyes, the dark water waiting below, the impossible distance to safety. Strong hands grabbed her jacket from behind. Boone's momentum carried them both backward as the truck broke free. The sound was devastating, screaming metal, splintering wood, and the hollow boom of the vehicle hitting the water. Spray flew up, icy droplets stinging Celia's face as she clutched the 2 rescued shepherds close. "The Malinois!" she cried out, but another movement caught her eye. Freya, who they'd brought along and tethered near the top of the ramp for scent identification, was already in motion. Despite her recent surgery, she moved with purpose, intercepting the panicked Malinois as it bolted toward the churning water where the truck was rapidly sinking. The Belgian Malinois outweighed Freya by at least 20 pounds, but she held firm. Her body blocked its path, stance low and steady, even as the bigger dog tried to shoulder past. Freya didn't growl or snap. She simply remained an immovable barrier between panic and disaster. Celia watched in amazement as Freya's calm presence slowly penetrated the Malinois' fear. The rescued dog's frantic energy gradually subsided, until it stood trembling but still beside its savior. "Good girl," Celia breathed, her voice thick with emotion. "Such a good, brave girl." They couldn't risk sirens or official response. It would alert Mallory's operation and destroy any chance of building a proper case. Instead, Boone worked quickly with his camera, documenting everything: the truck's position as it sank, tire marks on the ramp, serial numbers from the broken chains, even the injuries on the rescued dogs. Celia performed quick medical checks on their 3 survivors. Dehydrated, undernourished, but no immediate life-threatening conditions. Like Freya, they showed signs of being used as unwilling drug mules, scarring around their abdomens, behavioral indicators of forced feeding. "We need to move," Boone said softly, marking the coordinates on his GPS. Handlers could return any minute. They retreated as quietly as they'd come, soaked to the skin and shaking from more than just the cold. The rescued dogs followed willingly, staying close to Freya as if recognizing her as their protector. Celia's hand found the shepherd's ruff, feeling the steady strength there. Back at their vehicle, safely hidden in the shadows, Celia finally let herself process how close they'd come to disaster. The truck could have dragged them all under. Instead, they'd saved 3 lives, thanks to Boone's quick reaction and Freya's extraordinary intervention. She looked at her dog, who sat alertly watching over her newly rescued charges. There was something different in Freya's eyes now, a spark of confidence that hadn't been there before. In saving another dog from panic and fear, She'd somehow found her own strength. Boone finished securing the evidence photos and turned to Celia. His usually steady hands still showed a slight tremor. "That was too close," he said quietly. Celia nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. She simply reached out and squeezed his hand, feeling the answering pressure of his fingers. They'd been partners in this investigation from the start. But tonight's shared brush with death had forged something deeper. The rescued dogs huddled together in the back of Boone's SUV, while Freya maintained her watchful position nearby. Despite her recent surgery, she showed no signs of pain or fatigue, only that newfound steadiness that spoke of finally knowing her true worth. Looking at her shepherd's proud profile in the dim light, Celia felt tears prick her eyes. This was more than just a working partnership now. This was something profound, a connection forged in crisis, tempered by trust, and sealed by Freya's incredible display of courage. They drove away from the inlet in silence, leaving behind only ripples on the dark water where the truck had vanished. The evidence was secured, the dogs were safe, and most importantly, they were alive to continue their fight against Mallory's operation. Freya's warm breath tickled Celia's ear as the shepherd leaned forward from the back seat, as if checking on her human's well-being. Celia reached back to scratch behind those alert ears, remembering how close they'd come to losing everything tonight. "We did it, girl," she whispered. "We did it together." Back in Boone's SUV, Celia's hands still trembled from their near disaster at the boathouse. As she shifted in her seat, something hard pressed against her hip. Reaching into her pocket, she pulled out a single capsule, Iwes, intact and sealed, unlike the scattered debris they'd left behind. "Hold up," she said, examining the metallic shell under the dim car light. "We might have something here." Boone glanced over, his expression tightening. Evidence should go straight to the lab. "I know, but—" Celia turned the capsule in her fingers. It felt different from the ones they'd removed from Freya during surgery. Heavier, more precisely machined. "This isn't like the others." They drove to the clinic in tense silence. The 3 rescued dogs had settled in the back, huddled close to Freya, who maintained her protective watch. Once inside the familiar examination room, away from any prying eyes, Celia placed the capsule on a steel tray under the bright medical lights. "If there are drugs inside," Boone started. "It's not drugs," Celia said with certainty, studying the threading on the cap. "The weight's wrong. And look at the quality of this seal. I sell. This is precision engineering, not street-level packaging." With steady hands that belied her racing heart, she carefully unscrewed the cap. Inside, tightly rolled, was a single sheet of paper. As she smoothed it out on the examination table, her breath caught. "Oh my God," she whispered. It was a manifest, printed on Port Authority letterhead. Gate numbers were clearly marked, 4 specific checkpoints highlighted in yellow. Time windows were listed with military precision. But what made Celia's blood run cold was the date, tonight. "This isn't just a smuggling operation," Boone said, leaning in to study the document. "This is a proof of concept." Celia nodded slowly as the pieces clicked into place. "He's not selling drugs at all. He's selling the method." She looked at Freya, remembering the careful conditioning, the empty capsules used for training. "He's proving he can move anything through secure checkpoints using trained dogs, once this works." "It could spread statewide," Boone finished. "Every port, every checkpoint where his security firm has contracts." They spread out a map of the port complex, comparing the gate numbers to Mallory's known contract areas. The overlap was perfect, too perfect to be random chance. Each highlighted checkpoint fell under his company's jurisdiction. "Look at these time windows," Boone said, pointing to the manifest. 20-minute gaps when his K9 units are scheduled for routine patrols. No other inspections during those windows. Celia felt sick. He's using his own security contracts to create the holes in security. The dogs aren't just carriers. They're cover. Who's going to question? A canine unit at a checkpoint? She looked at Freya, who had settled on her bed in the corner of the exam room. The shepherd's posture was different now, still cautious, but no longer cowering. When Celia approached, Freya's tail gave a small wag. "How are you feeling, girl?" Celia ran her hands gently over Freya's surgical site. The incision was healing well, with no signs of infection or strain from tonight's heroics. More importantly, the shepherd's eyes were clear and alert, tracking Celia's movements with growing confidence. "We'll need her," Boone said quietly. "If we're going to document this operation in action, we need a dog who knows the signs, who can alert us to their methods without spooking them." Celia nodded. "She's ready. Aren't you, girl?" Freya pressed her head into Celia's palm and that small gesture of trust brought tears to her eyes. For the next hour they worked methodically. Boone made careful copies of the manifest, while Celia prepared Freya for controlled fieldwork. She fitted the shepherd with a proper working vest, letting Freya get comfortable with the weight and feel of it. "Easy now," Celia murmured as she adjusted the straps. "Just like we practiced." Freya stood perfectly still, her tail low but steady, a far cry from the terrified dog who had first come into the clinic. Dawn was breaking when Boone made the call to a trusted investigator in the district attorney's office, an S-teen, someone he knew wouldn't be in Mallory's pocket. They arranged a secure handoff of the manifest copy, careful to keep the details of their next move restricted to absolute need to know. "Whatever happens tonight at those gates," Boone said, watching Freya work through simple training exercises with growing confidence, "Mallory can't know we're coming." Celia scratched behind Freya's ears, earning another gentle tail wag. "He won't. Will he, girl?" The shepherd's eyes met hers, steady and sure. They had evolved far beyond handler and rescue. They were partners, now, bound by trust and shared purpose. The manifest sat between them on the exam table, its gate numbers and time windows a stark reminder of how much was at stake. This wasn't just about saving one dog anymore. It was about stopping a system designed to exploit countless animals, to turn their loyalty and training against everything they were meant to protect. Boone gathered the copies and evidence photos into a secure envelope. "I'll get this to the DA's office. You two get some rest. Tonight's going to be long." Celia nodded, feeling the weight of exhaustion from their near disaster at the boathouse. But underneath the fatigue was a core of steel determination. They had the proof now. They had the timeline. Most importantly, they had each other, an unlikely team of a vet tech, a deputy, and a rescued shepherd, standing together against corruption that had nearly claimed Freya's life. The morning sun streamed through the clinic windows as Boone left for his meeting with the DA investigator. Celia settled onto the floor beside Freya's bed, one hand resting lightly on the shepherd's flank. They had a few hours to rest and prepare. Tonight, they would turn from witnesses to active investigators, using Mallory's own clockwork precision against him. Freya's breathing deepened into sleep, but her ears still twitched at every small sound, too alert, even in rest. Celia smiled, remembering the shepherd's unwavering courage at the boathouse. Yes, they were ready to finish what had started with one worried vet tech trusting her instincts about a dog in distress. The manifest's time windows ticked steadily closer as the morning wore on. Soon, they would put everything on the line to expose Mallory's operation. But for now, in the quiet of the familiar exam room, Celia let herself draw strength from Freya's steady presence and unwavering trust. The morning's hope crumbled under waves of institutional pressure. Celia sat in the clinic's break room, watching Boone pace as he held his phone to his ear. His expression grew darker with each word from his captain. "Yes, sir, I understand, sir." Boone's voice was tight, but the evidence clearly shows. He fell silent, listening. When he finally lowered the phone, his shoulders sagged. "They're pulling me off the case," he said, running a hand through his hair. "Captain says it's too sensitive for a deputy to handle alone. Says we need to wait for proper channels." Celia's stomach clenched. "Proper channels? While Mallory sets up more dogs for—" A sharp knock interrupted them. A courier stood at the door with a thick envelope. Legal documents spilled across the break room table. No 19. Cease and desist letters. Threats of defamation suits if Mallory's name appeared in any preliminary reports. "They're trying to bury this," Celia said, her voice shaking with anger. "Every hour we wait is another chance for him to move his operation." Boone stood silent for a long moment, staring at his badge. Then he reached for his utility belt and unclipped his spare radio. Without a word, he placed it on the table in front of Celia. She picked it up, feeling its weight. This wasn't just equipment. It was trust. Partnership. A silent agreement to see this through, badge or no badge. "We need to reorganize," Boone said quietly. "Minimal footprint, just us, tonight, at the boathouse. We document everything we can tie to that manifest, then hold position until my contact at the DA's office can respond." Celia nodded, already mentally preparing. "I'll work with Freya this afternoon. Short leash drills, calming exercises. She's still recovering, but she's strong enough for this." They spent the next hours methodically preparing. Celia worked with Freya in the clinic's side yard, keeping the sessions brief but focused. The shepherd's surgical site was healing well, and her responses grew sharper with each drill. "Good girl," Celia murmured, rewarding Freya's perfect heel position. The dog's tail wagged gently, so different from the terrified creature who had first entered the clinic. Inside, They assembled their gear with careful attention to detail. Slip leads that could be quickly deployed. A high-resolution camera with night capability, evidence bags and documentation forms, everything they would need to build an airtight case, assuming they got the chance. As evening approached, they spread the boathouse blueprints across an exam table. Boone's finger traced potential entry points while Celia studied the kennel records they'd gathered, looking for patterns in the dogs' holding areas. "They'll keep the fresh arrivals here," she said, pointing to a corner space. "Away from the main storage, good ventilation, easy access to the loading ramp." Boone nodded. "And if anything goes wrong, we've got clear lines to these exit points." He paused, meeting her eyes. "Celia, if this doesn't work..." "I know." She scratched Freya's ears, drawing strength from the shepherd's steady presence. "If we fail tonight, the method survives. They'll just find new handlers, new dogs." The drive to the inlet was silent, heavy with purpose. Clouds masked the moon, leaving only the soft phosphorescence of the water to light their way. They parked in the same spot as before, engine off, listening to the gentle lap of waves against the pilings. Freya sat alert in the back seat, her ears moving at each small sound. Celia checked her vest one final time, making sure the surgical site wasn't compressed. The shepherd had come so far from that first night, from victim to partner. "Remember," Boone whispered, "we document everything. No confrontations unless absolutely necessary. We're building a case, not making arrests." Celia adjusted the radio at her hip, its weight a reminder of everything at stake. In the distance, a faint mechanical purr carried across the water. They shared a look, hearts beating in sync with the inlet's rhythm. The operation was beginning. Now they would see if their preparation was enough to bring down Mallory's carefully constructed scheme. Through the darkness, ripples spread from an approaching motor. Freya's ears pricked forward, but she remained perfectly still, waiting for Celia's signal. They had come full circle, from that first X-ray to this moment. Whatever happened next would determine if their effort to save one dog could grow into something larger, something that might save many more. The motor grew louder. Celia felt Boone shift beside her, ready. Freya's breathing was steady, controlled. They were as prepared as they could be. Now they would wait, watch, and document, building their case piece by piece in the darkness. The boat's running lights cut through the mist, a dim glow that barely touched the water. Celia held her breath as the vessel nosed toward the dock, riding low enough that water occasionally lapped at its gunwales. Beside her, Freya remained perfectly still, only her eyes tracking the movement. Boone straightened his uniform and stepped out of the shadows. His badge caught what little light there was as he moved purposefully toward the edge of the dock. The boat's engine throttled down to an idle. "Harbor Patrol!" Boone called out, his voice carrying the authority of his position despite everything that had happened at the station. "We've had reports of suspicious activity in this area. I need to see your documentation." The pilot's face showed a flash of uncertainty in the dim light. He hadn't expected any official presence, especially not at this hour. Boone kept talking, asking about routes and schedules, keeping the man's attention focused entirely on him. Celia took her cue. With Freya at her side, she slipped into the boathouse, their footsteps silent on the weathered planks. The shepherd's nose worked continuously, sampling the air. They moved methodically through the space, checking every corner and shadow. Near the back wall, Freya suddenly stopped, her head lowered, nose working intensely at the seam where a large metal kennel met the floor. The kennel itself looked solid enough, but something about it made Celia's instincts buzz. She ran her hands along the base of the structure. There, a slight gap that shouldn't exist. Pulling out a small pry bar from her vest, Celia worked it into the space. With careful pressure, a section of flooring lifted, revealing a hidden compartment. "Good girl," she whispered to Freya, whose tail gave a single proud wag. The cache was exactly what they'd been looking for. Stacks of syringes lay neatly arranged beside sealed capsules identical to the ones they'd removed from Freya's body. But most damning of all were the ledgers, bound notebooks filled with careful records using the same coding system they'd found on the manifest. Celia's hands moved quickly but carefully, photographing everything in place before she touched it. Each item went into an evidence bag, labeled with time and location. Her medical training showed in the precise way she handled the syringes, ensuring they could be tested later. The ledgers proved to be a goldmine. Page after page detailed shipments, dates, and gate numbers at the port. Everything aligned perfectly with the manifest they'd found. This wasn't just evidence of tonight's operation. It was a record of the entire system Mallory had built. Outside, she could still hear Boone's steady voice keeping the pilot occupied. He was building a case for probable cause, carefully laying the groundwork that would let them hold everything together until help arrived. Freya sat beside the open compartment, her posture alert but relaxed. The shepherd's breathing was deep and even, showing no signs of stress from the exertion. The surgical site on her belly was barely visible now under her growing coat, a reminder of how far they'd come since that first night at the clinic. Celia did one final sweep of the compartment, making sure nothing had been missed. Everything was bagged, tagged, and photographed. The physical evidence, combined with the documentation, created an unshakable connection between this site and the port operations. She keyed the radio at her hip. Boone's spare radio, the one that represented so much trust between them. 2 clicks, their agreed-upon signal that she'd found what they needed. Boone acknowledged with a single click back, then she heard him shift his tone with the pilot. "Sir, based on reported activity and observations made this evening, I'm going to need you to remain here while we wait for additional units to arrive." The pilot protested, but there was no real heat in it. He seemed to sense that the game was up, at least for tonight. Celia emerged from the boathouse, evidence bags securely stowed in her vest. Freya stayed close to her side, head high, scanning continuously. They'd done it, found the proof they needed and documented everything by the book. Boone touched his phone, sending their pre-arranged signal to his contact at the DA's office. The response came quickly. Help was coming, but it would take time to get the right people in place. For the first time in what felt like days, Celia allowed herself to really breathe. They had the evidence. They had a suspect. Most importantly, they had proof of how the whole operation worked. Even if Mallory tried to bury this, the paper trail would be impossible to completely erase. Freya sat beside her, chest rising and falling in a steady rhythm as she kept her eyes fixed on the boathouse door. The shepherd's calm confidence was infectious. They'd caught the operation red-handed, documented everything properly, and now just had to hold position until reinforcements arrived. The inlet lapped quietly at the dock pilings. Boone maintained his professional demeanor as he kept the pilot in view. Everything felt balanced on a knife's edge, but for now it was holding. They had done what they set out to do, proven the method, seized the materials, and created an evidence chain that would be hard to break. Celia patted Freya's head gently, feeling the soft fur under her fingers. Together, they had uncovered something much bigger than one injured dog at a late-night clinic. Now they just had to wait and trust that the system they'd fought so hard to uphold would come through for them. The crack of a boot on wooden planks shattered their moment of triumph. Celia's blood ran cold as Trent Mallory emerged from the shadows, his polished appearance now replaced by tactical gear. A massive Rottweiler strained at a metal lead in his left hand. In his right, a pistol caught the dim light from the dock lamps. "I have to admit, you two have been thorough," Mallory said, his voice carrying across the dock with dangerous calm. Inconvenient, but thorough. The gun swung toward Boone. The sound was deafening, a sharp crack that echoed across the water. Boone dropped to one knee with a grunt of pain, clutching his upper arm where blood now darkened his uniform sleeve. "That's a warning," Mallory called out. "The next one won't be." Celia's hands trembled as she raised them slowly. Beside her, Freya's muscles bunched, reading the tension crackling through the air. The shepherd's ears were pinned flat, but she held position, waiting for Celia's command. "Miss Hart," Mallory said, taking measured steps forward. "Remove Freya's lead and lie face down on the dock, now." The evidence bags felt like lead weights in her vest pockets. One push, one struggle near the edge, and everything they'd gathered could vanish into the dark water. Months of work, proof of Mallory's entire operation, N1, all of it balanced on this moment. "The lead, Miss Hart," Mallory's voice hardened. "I won't ask again." Boone was still conscious, his breathing heavy but controlled. His free hand moved slowly toward the radio at his belt. Celia needed to keep Mallory's attention away from the deputy. "Why?" she asked, her voice steadier than she felt. "So you can use her for trafficking again?" The Rottweiler lunged forward, bringing Mallory a step closer. Its muscles rippled under sleek black fur, jaws powerful enough to shatter bone. This wasn't just an attack dog. It was a weapon that Mallory had carefully trained. "You really don't understand your position here, do you?" Mallory's smile was cold. "By morning, my attorneys will have buried your evidence under so many motions and complaints that no one will remember what started this. The Port Authority will back my contracts. The police chief will apologize for his overzealous deputy. And you?" He shook his head. "Hey, you'll be lucky to find work cleaning kennels." Celia's eyes caught on a coiled dock line wrapped around a metal cleat near her feet. Her mind raced, calculating angles and distances. Freya remained steady at her side, waiting for a signal. "I've built something valuable here," Mallory continued. "Something that works." Did you really think I'd let two nobodies with a hero complex tear it down? Behind him, Boone's fingers found his radio. His whispered words were barely audible. Officer down. Port inlet 4. Suspect armed. The gun shifted, centering on Celia's chest. Last chance. Release the dog and get down. Mallory's confidence was absolute. He stood like a man who had never lost control, who believed that money and influence could wash away any sin. The darkness of the moment pressed in around them, their careful investigation, their seized evidence, their hope for justice all crumbling under the weight of his certainty. The Rottweiler's growl rolled across the dock like thunder. Freya trembled against Celia's leg, but held her ground. Everything they'd worked for balanced on a razor's edge, with only gunmetal and trained violence standing between them and the truth they'd fought to uncover. Celia kept her hands raised, mind racing. The dock line was just inches from her foot. Boone was wounded but conscious. The evidence was secure in her vest. And Freya, brave, loyal Freya, was watching her for a sign. Their triumph had turned to ashes in their mouths, but they weren't finished. Not yet. Not while they still had breath to fight. The night pressed in around them, water lapping at the dock pilings like a metronome counting down to whatever came next. The dock's wooden planks creaked beneath Celia's feet as she shifted her weight, mind racing to buy precious seconds. She kept her hands visible, focusing on appearing compliant, while her thoughts whirled with possibilities. Freya's still recovering from major surgery, Celia called out, her voice steady despite her racing heart. She's not ready for any sudden movements. The incision site is still healing. She took a careful step closer to the coiled dock line, making it look like a nervous shuffle. Mallory's attention stayed fixed on her, the gun unwavering. Spare me the veterinary lecture, Mallory sneered. That dog is my property. Boone pressed his hand against his bleeding arm, grimacing as he inched sideways. The movement was subtle but deliberate, drawing Mallory's sightline away from Celia. The deputy's face was pale from blood loss, but his eyes remained sharp and focused. Celia lowered herself slightly, bending her knees to maintain balance on the slick planks. Under her breath, she began murmuring the counter-conditioning cues she'd practiced with Freya during recovery. Easy, steady, hold. The familiar words seemed to calm them both. Freya's muscles remained taut, but her breathing evened out. The shepherd's eyes never left Celia's face, waiting for signals she'd learned to trust. Moving with careful precision, Celia reached into her vest. The evidence bags crinkled softly as she withdrew them. She needed both hands free for what came next. With practiced efficiency, she tucked the bags behind the false floor they'd discovered earlier, making sure they were secure but accessible. The coiled dock line was thick and heavy, perfect for what she needed. Without drawing attention to the movement, she worked the tail free from its neat loops. The rope was damp from sea spray, but that might work to her advantage. Distant sirens wailed somewhere in the city, but the sound was too faint to offer real hope. They would have to save themselves. Celia studied the scene with clinical detachment, like assessing surgical angles before an operation. The Rottweiler's powerful muscles bunched beneath glossy fur, ready to launch forward at Mallory's command. The dog's training would make its attack predictable, a straight-line charge aimed at maximum damage. If she could time it right, that same training would work against them. One precise movement to redirect the dog's momentum, using the slip of the lead like a fulcrum. The Rottweiler's own power would do the rest, hopefully taking Mallory down onto the wet planks. It was desperately risky. If her timing was off by even a fraction of a second, the Rottweiler's jaws would find their target. But it was the only plan that gave them a chance while protecting what mattered most: Freya's safety, Boone's life, and the evidence they'd fought so hard to gather. Celia met Freya's steady gaze, seeing complete trust reflected there. The shepherd's ears twitched forward at her whispered command. Hold. The night air felt electric with tension. Water lapped steadily against the pilings below, counting down the moments until everything would change. Celia's muscles coiled, ready to move. Their plan wasn't perfect, but it was all they had. She kept her voice low and soothing as she continued the calming mantra, each word a promise between her and Freya. Steady, easy, hold. The rope lay ready at her feet. Boone's position was set. The evidence was secured. Now, they just needed the right moment. That critical point when training and trust and desperate courage would determine all their fates. Celia drew a deep breath, centered herself, and waited. Sometimes the hardest part of any operation was knowing exactly when to begin. Take them! Mallory's command cracked through the night air like a whip. The Rottweiler launched forward, a dark missile of muscle and training. In that same heartbeat, Celia's fingers closed around the dock line. She snapped it free with one fluid motion, the heavy rope unfurling like a snake. Freya moved with the instant precision of complete trust. Without hesitation, she pivoted into the charging Rottweiler's path. Her timing was perfect, not attacking, but redirecting. The shepherd's shoulder caught the other dog mid-leap, deflecting its momentum in a way no human could have managed. The Rottweiler's trajectory shifted sharply. Instead of finding Celia's throat, the attack dog slammed sideways into Mallory's legs. The impact threw his balance, sending him staggering on the rain-slick boards. The pistol flew from his grip as he windmilled his arms. The weapon skittered across the wet planks with a series of metallic scrapes before disappearing over the edge. A soft splash marked its descent into the dark water below. Despite the bleeding wound in his arm, Boone surged upward with the fluid grace of long practice. His good hand locked around Mallory's wrist like an iron band. Using the bigger man's off-balance momentum, the deputy drove him face down onto the dock. "Stay down," Boone ordered, voice steady as he pulled his handcuffs free. The steel clicked with satisfying finality around Mallory's wrists. "You're under arrest for assault with a deadly weapon, animal cruelty, and attempted murder of a law enforcement officer." The Rottweiler scrambled to its feet, but Freya was already there. She stood over the other dog, head high and tail straight, not attacking but projecting calm authority. The attack dog's training wavered in the face of her steady presence. It sank to its belly, whining softly. Blue and red lights suddenly painted the boathouse walls in sweeping arcs. The wail of approaching sirens grew louder, no longer a distant hope but immediate reality. Boone's radio call had finally brought backup. Celia moved quickly to secure their evidence. She retrieved the bags from behind the false floor, documenting everything with her phone's camera. The capsules, syringes, and ledgers created a clear chain linking Mallory directly to the trafficking operation. "Make sure you get his face in the frame," Boone called out, still keeping pressure on Mallory's restraints. "We want everything tied together. Him, the contraband, and the attack dog." Celia's hands were rock steady as she photographed the scene from multiple angles. Each image captured another piece of proof: Mallory on the ground, the weapons cache, the scared but subdued Rottweiler, the distinctive boathouse interior matching the manifest's location codes. Heavy footsteps announced the arrival of the DA's investigator, badge gleaming as he swept in with uniformed officers close behind. His eyes widened slightly at the tableau before him, but his voice was pure professional satisfaction. "Looks like you've wrapped this one up nice and neat for us," he said, already pulling out his own camera. "Good work." Celia knelt beside Freya, burying her fingers in the shepherd's fur. The dog's heart beat strong and steady against her palm, no sign of strain from her recent surgery. They had done it, not through luck or chance, but through the unshakable bond between human and canine, through precise timing and hard-earned skill. More officers swarmed the scene, securing the perimeter and beginning the meticulous process of evidence collection. Paramedics rushed to tend to Boone's arm, while animal control officers carefully approached the subdued Rottweiler. Mallory lay silent now, his expensive suit soaked and filthy against the rough boards. His carefully constructed world of influence and intimidation had crumbled in the face of simple courage and determination. Celia watched as the DA's investigator read Mallory his rights, each word another nail in the coffin of his trafficking operation. The manifest's delivery window would pass unused, the port gates would stay secure. The cruel method he had built using innocent animals would never spread beyond this inlet. Freya pressed against her leg, a warm reminder of everything they had overcome together. From that first X-ray to this final confrontation, every choice had led them here, to justice, to safety, to the truth finally breaking free into the light. The courthouse hummed with anticipation as the criminal proceedings against Trent Mallory unfolded over several grueling weeks. Every morning Celia took her place in the gallery, watching as the prosecution methodically dismantled the carefully constructed facade of the respected security contractor. Her documentation proved invaluable. The X-rays, surgical records, and detailed notes of Freya's condition created an ironclad foundation for the case. Each image told its own story. Too sane. The distended abdomen packed with capsules, the surgical removal of dozens of containers, the careful cataloguing of their contents. The medical evidence painted a picture of calculated cruelty that no amount of legal maneuvering could obscure. The district attorney's office built their case like a pyramid, starting with the base of animal cruelty charges. They showed how Mallory had systematically abused dogs, using their bodies as living containers for smuggling operations. Veterinary experts testified about the physical trauma and psychological conditioning required to make animals swallow foreign objects repeatedly. Freya's case became the centerpiece. Her recovery photos, showing the transformation from a terrified, bloated creature to a healthy, confident dog, moved even the most stoic jurors. The prosecutor displayed Celia's careful progress notes alongside the images, demonstrating both the extent of the abuse and the professional dedication that had saved Freya's life. Deputy Boone Kettering's testimony proved equally compelling. Despite pressure from his superiors to back away from the case, his reports remained meticulously detailed and accurate. He described finding the manifest hidden in the capsule, connecting Mallory's security contracts directly to specific port gates. The timing windows, gate numbers, and delivery codes created a perfect match with Mallory's legitimate business operations. It wasn't just smuggling, Boone explained to the jury, his voice steady and clear. It was infrastructure. The dogs weren't just carrying contraband. They were being conditioned to create a replicable system that could be scaled up across multiple ports. The prosecution's case expanded beyond individual incidents to posse, reveal the full scope of the conspiracy. Former handlers, facing their own charges, began to cooperate. They detailed the careful conditioning process, how dogs were trained using empty capsules first, then gradually transitioned to carrying actual contraband. The system was designed to be invisible, hiding behind the legitimate face of canine security services. One handler's testimony particularly struck home. "We started with the empty shells," he explained, voice thick with shame. "Got them used to swallowing them, holding them, then we'd mix in the real packages. By the time they were operational, they could carry dozens at once. And since they were security dogs, nobody looked twice when they went through checkpoints." The boathouse evidence proved devastating to Mallory's defense. The false floor containing supplies, ledgers, and conditioning tools matched perfectly with the manifest's codes. Photographs showed how the isolated inlet provided cover for loading and unloading operations. Every detail confirmed the calculated nature of the enterprise. Mallory's expensive legal team tried to argue selective prosecution and entrapment, but their arguments crumbled against the weight of physical evidence. The attempt to shoot Deputy Kettering at the boathouse had shattered any possibility of painting their client as a legitimate businessman caught in a misunderstanding. Throughout the trial, Celia divided her time between court appearances and caring for the rescued dogs. Each animal required specialized medical attention and behavioral rehabilitation. The clinic created a dedicated recovery program, using Freya's successful treatment as a model. Some dogs needed extensive surgery to repair internal damage. Others required careful psychological support to overcome their conditioning. Freya became an unexpected therapy dog for the other rescues. Her calm presence helped settle nervous animals, showing them by example that recovery was possible. Celia often found her lying quietly beside newly arrived dogs, offering the simple comfort of shared experience. The verdict, when it came, was comprehensive. The jury found Mallory guilty on all counts: multiple charges of animal cruelty, drug trafficking, conspiracy to import controlled substances, and attempted murder of a law enforcement officer. His carefully cultivated image as a successful security consultant shattered completely. During sentencing, the judge spoke with barely contained anger. "You've not only broken numerous laws," she declared, fixing Mallory with a stern gaze, "but you've betrayed public trust and inflicted calculated cruelty on innocent animals. Your actions show a complete disregard for both human and animal welfare in pursuit of profit." The sentence reflected the severity of the crimes: 25 years in federal prison, massive fines, and a permanent ban on any involvement with animal-related businesses. The judge also ordered full restitution for the medical care of all recovered dogs. The aftermath brought sweeping changes. Port authorities cancelled all contracts with Mallory's security firm and implemented stricter oversight of canine units. The clinic received funding to expand its rehabilitation programs for abused animals. Most importantly, every dog from the operation found placement in specially trained foster homes equipped to handle their unique needs. Celia returned to her work at the clinic with a new status. Her colleagues, who had once dismissed her concerns, now sought her expertise in identifying signs of abuse and trafficking. The clinic owner, chastened by his earlier wavering, gave her full authority to develop new protocols for handling suspected cruelty cases. The final piece fell into place when Freya's adoption papers were signed. Though many offers had come in, there was never any real question about her permanent home. She had already chosen her person that first night in the clinic, when Celia had trusted her instincts and refused to look away from obvious suffering. As Celia filed the last of her court testimony records, she reflected on how justice had finally aligned with truth. The weight of evidence, the courage of witnesses, and the dedication of professionals like Boone had combined to create real change. It wasn't just about punishing one man's crimes, it was about protecting every animal from similar abuse in the future. The story became a landmark case in animal welfare law, cited in other prosecutions and used to train veterinary professionals in recognizing signs of trafficking. But for Celia, the most important outcome lay in the quiet moments. Watching rescued dogs learn to play again, seeing their trust slowly rebuild, knowing that every animal saved represented a small but vital victory for compassion over cruelty. The autumn sunlight streamed through the clinic windows, casting warm patterns across the examination room floor. Freya sat patiently beside the metal table, her coat gleaming with health that seemed impossible just weeks ago. The transformation was remarkable. Where there had once been a frightened, sickly dog with a distended belly, now sat a strong, confident German shepherd with bright eyes and alert ears. Celia ran her hand along Freya's back, marveling at how the coarse fur had grown in thick and lustrous. The surgical scar on her abdomen had healed cleanly, barely visible beneath the new growth. Most importantly, her appetite had returned with enthusiasm. No more picking at food or nervous hesitation. Freya now approached her meals with healthy vigor. "Look at you," Celia murmured, scratching behind Freya's ears. "Who would believe you're the same dog from that night?" The adoption papers lay on the exam table, crisp and official. Celia had read through them 3 times already, though she knew every word by heart. Her hand was perfectly steady as she reached for the pen, no tremors of uncertainty, no second thoughts. This moment felt as natural as breathing. As she began signing her name, Freya pressed closer, resting her head against Celia's hip. A warm tongue gently licked her wrist, leaving a damp spot on her skin. The simple gesture of trust brought tears to Celia's eyes. "Yeah, girl," she whispered. "We're making it official. You're staying right here with me." The sound of footsteps on the clinic's front steps drew both their attention. Through the window, Celia saw Deputy Boone Kettering ascending the short flight. He moved with confident purpose now, a far cry from the hesitant officer who had first responded to her call that fateful night. Freya's tail wagged in recognition as Boone entered, her entire demeanor relaxed and welcoming. It was yet another sign of how far she'd come. Where once she had cowered at any male presence, now she greeted Boone like an old friend. "Perfect timing," Celia said, holding up the completed papers. "Just making it official." Boone's smile was warm and genuine as he crossed the room. "Congratulations to you both." He knelt to greet Freya, who immediately pressed her nose into his palm. Though I don't think anyone's surprised by this outcome. Standing again, he met Celia's eyes with an expression that held both certainty and hope. "Speaking of perfect timing, I was wondering if you'd like to have dinner with me tonight." The question was casual, but his smile carried deeper meaning. Well, the promise of something steady and true, built on shared experience and mutual respect. No drama, no games, just 2 people who had faced darkness together and emerged stronger. Celia felt her own smile widening. "I'd love to." "Great." His relief was visible, endearing in its honesty. "I know a place that has outdoor seating. Freya would be welcome too." They spent the next few minutes discussing possibilities for Freya's future training. Not as a working dog, she had earned her retirement from any official duties, but as a therapy dog, perhaps. Her gentle nature with other animals and calm presence could be invaluable in helping other rescued dogs adjust. "She's already showing such good instincts with the nervous cases," Celia explained, watching Freya's attentive expression. "Last week, we had a terrified spaniel come in, wouldn't let anyone near him. Freya just lay down nearby, totally calm, and within an hour, the spaniel was sleeping right beside her." Boone nodded approvingly. "Sounds perfect. Let her help others on her own terms, no pressure or expectations." "Exactly. Just a safe, loved life where she can be herself." Celia's mind drifted back to that pivotal night, when she had stood her ground against Mallory's intimidation and insisted on the X-ray. One choice, made from pure instinct and professional ethics, had set off a chain of events that transformed everything: her standing at the clinic, Boone's evolution from hesitant deputy to confident investigator, and most importantly, Freya's journey from victim to survivor. The clinic staff who had once dismissed her concerns now sought her input on suspected abuse cases. Her detailed documentation had become the standard for handling similar situations. Even the owner, who had wavered under political pressure, now backed her judgment without question. But the real victory lay in the quiet moments like this. Freya's steady breathing beside her, Boone's patient presence, the knowledge that they had all found something true in their shared struggle for justice. No headlines needed, no public acclaim required. Just the simple triumph of trust restored and safety secured. As they prepared to leave for the evening, Celia gathered Freya's leash and her own bag. The setting sun painted the clinic in soft orange light, a gentle reminder that even the darkest nights eventually yield to dawn. She watched Freya trot happily between her and Boone, secure in her place in their unconventional family unit. This was their new beginning, not a dramatic fresh start, but something better. A future built on proven courage, earned trust, and genuine care. As they stepped out into the evening together, Celia felt the rightness of it settle in her heart. Sometimes the bravest choice was simply to follow your instincts and stand firm for what you knew was right. Everything else, respect, love, justice, grew naturally from that foundation. The autumn breeze carried the tang of salt and diesel across Port Danton's docks, where Celia Hart walked with Freya padding contentedly at her side. The German shepherd's coat gleamed in the late afternoon sun, a far cry from the frightened, sickly creature she had first examined all those months ago. Workers called out greetings as they passed. "Looking good, Freya." A burly stevedore waved from his forklift. Where once there had been whispers about Mallory's influence, now there were different stories circulating about the veterinary technician who had refused to look away, and the deputy who had stood beside her when others wouldn't. Freya's tail wagged as they approached their usual meeting spot near the water's edge. Deputy, now Sergeant, Boone Kettering was already waiting, his familiar figure silhouetted against the setting Sunday. His promotion had come through shortly after Mallory's conviction, a quiet acknowledgement of his role in breaking the case. "Right on time," he said warmly, reaching down to scratch behind Freya's ears. The easy familiarity between them felt natural now, though Celia could still remember the tension of their first meeting in the clinic's exam room. Hard to believe how much has changed, Celia mused, looking out over the water. Sometimes I still think about that night with the X-ray, one decision that could have ended my career. Instead, it ended his, Boone finished, his shoulder brushing against hers. You showed everyone what real courage looks like. They walked together along the waterfront, where fishing boats bobbed gently at their moorings. Freya paused occasionally to test the wind, her posture relaxed and confident. When she leaned against Celia's leg, it was with trust rather than fear, a silent testimony to how far they'd all come. "I've been thinking," Boone said softly as twilight painted the sky in shades of purple and gold, "about the future. Not as a sergeant, or even as your partner in solving crimes." He turned to face her, his expression open and honest, "but as someone who wants to build something real with you." Celia felt warmth bloom in her chest. The courage that had first sparked in that moment of defiance against Mallory had grown into something deeper, a foundation of trust and mutual respect that promised something worth building on. Freya sat between them, whole and healthy, her dark eyes bright with contentment. In her steady presence, Celia saw their shared journey reflected. From darkness to light, from fear to strength, from isolation to connection. As the port's lights began to twinkle on around them, Celia's smile held all the answer Boone needed. They had learned to trust their instincts, to stand firm in their convictions, and now those same qualities were guiding them toward a future bright with possibility. Thanks for watching. If any part of this story lingered with you, consider subscribing. I'll be here again tomorrow, sharing another tale that speaks to the soul.